And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Big Blue Sports. I'm your host, Matt Volz, a senior here at SUNY Fredonia. The Bills are back in the win column, beating the Steelers on Sunday to go to 8-4 on the year. The Bandits have also started their season. The Bandits are 1-0 following a win over the Georgia Swarm last weekend in Buffalo. They're off this weekend before hosting Halifax next weekend. Not a great game for the Sabres last night as they began their 6-game road trip in Philadelphia. The Sabres started out hot, took a 1-0 lead early, and then lost 5-2. So we will talk more about all of that later. And first of all, we'll talk about Fredonia sports as per usual. And some news that came out very recently. Fredonia baseball is welcoming a new head coach to the team. Frank Jagoda III, who's a Dunkirk High School graduate and a SUNY Fredonia graduate as well. Frank Jagoda takes over a Fredonia baseball team that has not had a winning season in 7 years. Will be 8 years once the spring season starts. Their last winning season was back in 2018. He takes over for Jordan Basile as the head coach of the Blue Devils baseball team. Jagoda comes with some MLB experience as well. He actually worked in 2 different Major League Baseball organizations. He worked 2 years he worked for both the Minnesota Twins and the Tampa Bay Rays organizations. So the Blue Devils very excited to welcome him into the fold. And, it's a baseball program that has really struggled over the last handful of years. And the hope is that, they get another local product in there who has some excellent experience coaching as well. Maybe Frank Jagoda can turn some things around. Their season starts at the end of February, about 2.5 months from now. As for winter sports, there's a little bit of a mix. Some good, some bad. We'll start with the good. Women's basketball is off to an excellent start. They have won 4 of their first 5 games. They are 4-1. Most recently, they had a tournament in Brockport the weekend that all of us here on campus left for Thanksgiving break. The Blue Devils were at Brockport. They faced Ithaca on Friday. This was back on November 21st. Blue Devils lost that game 65-59 for their first loss of the season, and then rebounded on Saturday afternoon with a 62-55 win over William Smith. Fredonia is 4-1, as I had mentioned, and that win over William Smith, which was a 7-point win, their narrowest margin of victory all season. Their other 3 wins were in complete dominant fashion. A 71-44 win over Thiel in the season opener. They beat Hilbert by 40 back about a month ago or so, 88-48. And then their first road game of the season, they beat Keuka 74-52. So women's basketball has been on quite a roll. Sherry Nowatzki coaching in her second season for the team. And their season continues. So SUNYAC play actually begins for them this weekend. They are headed on the long SUNYAC road trip as the Blue Devils will head to Plattsburgh for a 5:30 tip-off tomorrow, Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. at Potsdam. They'll return home on Tuesday, December 9th to face Houghton at 5:30. Men's basketball, of course, they travel together. The men's and women's basketball teams do. Men's basketball has had a bit of a slow start to their season. They are 0-5 through their first 5 games. They've had a couple of pretty close losses. They had back in November a loss to Hilbert. They lost that game by 7, and a game against Elmira that they lost by just 4. So they've had a couple of close losses. They were at a tournament as well. They were at Hobart up in Geneva. First game of that tournament, again, this was that same weekend, November 21st and 22nd. On the first game of the tournament, a loss 92-56 to Hamilton. And on Saturday, an interesting matchup as the Blue Devils faced the United States Merchant Marine Academy. and it was a close game. The Blue Devils fell 77-63. SUNYAC play also starts for the men's basketball team this weekend. They're on the road for the long road trip up north, taking on Plattsburgh at 7:30 on Friday and Potsdam at 4 o'clock on Saturday. Men's basketball is not home again until the new year. They actually are not home until Saturday, January 3rd at 4 p.m. when they host Hartwick. So that will be the return of the Blue Devils to the Dodds Hall Gym. Hockey has also had a bit of a slow start to the season. They're still looking for their first win of the 2025-2026 campaign. 0-7-1 through their first 8 games. It has been a rough season so far for Jeff Meredith's team. The lone point that the Blue Devils got was back on November 14th, a 1-1 tie at Morrisville. Other than that, it's been all losses, and it's been primarily losses where the Blue Devils really have not had much to show for it. Fredonia has scored just 1 goal in each of their last 5 games, and they are 0-4-1 in that stretch. And before that, they had scored 2 on Halloween night against Potsdam. They put 3 on the board the night after. They had back-to-back home against Potsdam, and then a 6-3 loss at Geneseo in early November as well. So 0-7-1. Fredonia is home for 2 this weekend. The Blue Devils are at home 7 o'clock on Friday night facing Plattsburgh, and a 4 p.m. matchup against Skidmore on Saturday. I will be on the call for both of those games. You can catch tomorrow night's game on YouTube on WNYF's YouTube channel, and Saturday's game you can watch live on FredoniaBlueDevils.com. And then the December slate is over, and then it's into January for the hockey team. So indoor track as well, getting their season close to starting. The men's and women's indoor track season begins tomorrow as they will travel out to Allegheny County to face Houghton, a meet hosted there. 3:30 p.m. that meet will begin. Both the men's and women's team. That is their only meet scheduled in the month of December. After that, they head to RIT at the end of January. But the indoor season is gearing up towards their beginning. Swim and dive, again, the men's team still looking for their first win of the season. They hosted the Blue Devil Invitational last week, or I should say 2 weeks ago, as most Fredonia students were likely heading out onto break. The Blue Devils hosted 6 opposing teams, 6 non-conference teams: Brockport, St. Vincent, Hartwick, Pitt Bradford, Penn State Barron, and Allegheny were all here for the 3-day invitational. The men's team finished in 6th place out of those 7 total teams, and the women's team also finishing in 6th out of those 7 teams. Both teams are at home on Saturday for a meet against Genesee Community College, and that meet will get started at 1 p.m. So that is a look at your winter sports. Going to take a short break, and when I come back, I'm going to talk about the Buffalo Bandits, who are 1-0 following a win last weekend over the Georgia Swarm. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports this afternoon on WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports here on WCVF 88.9 FM. Do you like local music? Do you like reading zines? What if I told you there's something for you right here on campus? Rock a Little is an independent music zine based out of Fredonia. If you see a pocket-sized zine lying around campus, pick it up and take it home with you. You'll read articles covering local music releases, local shows, and other concerts in the area. Published once a month, Rock a Little also features interviews with people involved in the local music scene. For more information and updates, you can find Rock a Little on Instagram at rockalittle.zine. So the Bandits are off to a 1-0 start. They were at home on last Saturday, to face the Georgia Swarm and a sellout crowd. And again, something that Bandits fans have grown very accustomed to, very familiar with, is starting the year with the banner raising ceremony. So this is, of course, the 3rd season in a row that the Bandits last year was the third season in a row that the Bandits brought home the NLL Cup. Now, I want to sort of bring back a moniker that was mentioned back in the early 90s when the Bills were... So, take it back to 1993, which was actually, ironically, another year where the Bandits won the championship. So, in the 1993 season, the Bills were looking to go to the Super Bowl for the fourth year in a row. And NFL fans were not crazy about that idea. The Bills, the first Super Bowl that the Bills were in against the Giants in Super Bowl 25, of course, was very close with Norwood missing the field goal at the end. The other two after that were really bad. You had a 37-24 loss to Washington in Super Bowl 26 up in Minneapolis, which the score, the Bills only lost that game by 13. The score is incredibly misleading. Buffalo was absolutely trounced in that game. It was like, if I remember correctly, I believe it was 37-10 before the Bills scored a couple of touchdowns in what was essentially garbage time. It was 24-0 Washington at the half, actually. So, it was that. And then the year after, when they played at the Rose Bowl, was the biggest blowout of the Bills' Super Bowls when they lost 52-17 to the Cowboys. Of course, that was the game where the Bills turned the ball over 9 times, which is still, to this day, a Super Bowl record. The Bills also... that was also the game where Leon Lett recovered the fumble and ran it all the way back and started showboating early, only for Don Beebe to run him down and knock the ball out of his hand. So people were absolutely sick and tired of seeing the Bills in the Super Bowl every year. People kept saying that the Bills were ruining their Super Bowl, that no one wanted to see this team go to the Super Bowl again and get crushed again. Everybody was tired of it. The Bills didn't really get that message. They went around, they had a phrase, and I'll paraphrase here. They said something along the lines of, let's tick them off and go for 4, if you're understanding what I'm meaning here. So that became a moniker, and then almost kind of became a rallying cry. There were even T-shirts that were made for the Bills to wear around Buffalo. And the Bills, of course, ended up, they made the playoffs, and they beat Joe Montana and the Chiefs to go to their 4th straight Super Bowl. Now, we don't like to talk about what happened in that game. They lost to the Cowboys again. But despite the loss, it became... it became a rallying cry, a huge rallying cry. And it's kind of interesting because 32 years later, we are almost in a same, obviously on a much smaller scale. I mean, the National Lacrosse League is nothing to the degree of the NFL, but we're almost in a similar boat. So the Bandits, now, of course, it's different because the Bandits have won 3 straight championships. The Bills had lost 3. The Bandits actually have been to the NLL final 5 times in a row. They are, so it's I guess they're trying to go for their 6th appearance, but the Bandits are trying to go for their 4th straight title, which would be a National Lacrosse League record. So the Bandits are the 2nd team in league history to win 3 straight championships. The Rochester Nighthawks did that from 2012 to 2014. They won 3 in a row. And oh, by the way, Matt Vince was their goalie, which is a crazy stat. I think it was like, I saw that there are only 3 athletes in the NFL, NHL, MLB, and NBA, and NLL. There are only 3 athletes who have ever won 3 straight championships and done that twice. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Matt Vince, which is crazy. And by the way, Matt Vince is the only player in, I believe, the entire history of North American sports to have three-peats with two different teams. He's easily the greatest goalie in the history of the National Lacrosse League. He's the best goalie maybe in lacrosse's history. So, anyways, so the Bandits, of course, they are not, the rest of the NLL fan base is kind of tired of Buffalo. They're tired of the Bandits dominating year in and year out. I mean, that'll happen anytime any particular athlete or any particular team is, dominant and having a long, prolonged run of success. It's been the case that a lot of NLL fans are absolutely sick and tired of seeing the Bandits go to the finals year after year, but also win the cup year after year. They've won 3 straight. They've been to 5 straight finals. And I think people they're tired of seeing Buffalo in the finals every single year. Buffalo fans, though, are kind of meeting it with a I don't care and we're going to do it anyways mentality. And it's a team that's good enough to. They in the offseason, there were a few moves. They lost there were only two, notable players. There were a couple of other players who played a little bit here and there who switched teams, but the main 2 players that the Bandits lost in free agency, Chase Frazier and Chris Cloutier, both leaving to sign with the Las Vegas Desert Dogs, a team that is actually coached, and he's their coach and general manager, is a former Bandit, Sean Williams. And so that's obviously a little bit tough to stomach. But what do the Bandits do to replace 2 players leaving? They bring back 2 old faces. And the Bandits did that. Buffalo re-signed Ryan Benesh to a 1-year deal. So Benesh played for Buffalo for a few years. He played early in his career. He's kind of, he's played a handful of he's played for a handful of teams across the course of his career. He's played in 10 different teams. So he began his career in 2007 with the Toronto Rock. He was previously here. He played 4 seasons from 2014 to 2017, which included the best season of his career back in 2015 when he put up 113 points and scored a career-high 55 goals as well. He was a top offensive threat. It was him, Mark Stainhouse, the very end of John Tavares' career, and then pretty much right after that is when Dane Smith came in, and it wasn't too long after that Josh Byrne was brought in as well. So, Benesh is somebody who he was a fan favorite. He's 40 years old. He'll turn 41 in January. He's been in the league since 2007. This is his 19th National Lacrosse League season. He has never won a championship. He's been to the finals once. He went to the finals with the Bandits in 2016 when they lost to the Rush. But he's never won a championship. The same can be said for Buffalo's other offseason acquisition, or I guess you say reacquisition, Mitch Desnew. So Mitch Desnew was a defenseman who played the first 5 seasons of his career in Buffalo. He played from 2016 to 2020 as a member of the Bandits. He was, another fan favorite. He was a very solid defenseman. Ended up going to the Toronto Rock. Again, Desnew was part of 2 Bandits teams that reached the NLL Finals, 2016 when they lost to Saskatchewan, and 2019 when they lost to the Calgary Roughnecks. So after that, Desnew goes to Toronto, plays for the Rock for a few seasons. He played for the Rock for 3.5 seasons. He was traded to Philadelphia at the deadline last year, which was, part of Toronto's massive fire sale. They traded Nick Rose and a couple of other players as well. But he comes back to Buffalo. And this was a late offseason move. The Bandits trading first and second round picks to Philadelphia for Mitch DeSnew. He is in his 10th season in the National Lacrosse League. And again, Mitch DeSnew has never won a championship. Both of those players very much made an impact in Buffalo's season opener against the Georgia Swarm. It was a game that was very back and forth early. Buffalo led 5-4 at the end of the first quarter, and both DeSnew and Benesh picked up goals in that first quarter. The Bandits also got 2 goals from Dane Smith in that quarter. Shane Jackson for Georgia scored twice. So it was 5-4 Buffalo. Georgia rallied back in the second quarter. Shane Jackson scored 1 more to get the hat trick, as did Dane Smith. And Buffalo and Georgia were tied at 8. Caleb Benedict also got his second goal of the game for Georgia. So it's an 8-8 tie going into the third quarter. And that's when Buffalo kind of started to take over the game. So Nolan Burns scored for Georgia less than a minute into the game to put them ahead 9-8. And then the Bandits rallied back very quickly. Ian McKay and Josh Burns scored 2 goals 30 seconds apart from one another to put the Bandits very quickly ahead 10-9. Something happened in this third quarter that I have never seen before. So there was a play behind the net, and Brett Dobson, who's Georgia's goalie, who's actually a graduate of St. Bonaventure. So Brett Dobson went behind the net to try and play the ball, and one of the Bandits was back behind the net. I think it was Ian McKay. And Dobson just delivers a nasty cross-check, like right to the face. So we know it's going to be a 5-minute penalty, and they reviewed it. It's a 5-minute major. Usually when goalies commit penalties, and this is the case in hockey too, usually it's someone else on the team serves that penalty, and you just play a man down. But the goalie's still in net. I've never seen this in my life. The officials actually told Brett Dobson that he himself had to go to the box. So the Swarm had to bring in their backup, Devlin Shanahan, who's actually a former Bandits backup. He won the championship last year as a backup for Buffalo. It was kind of funny that, to look over and see, because they had another player in the box at the time too, and then just massive goalie Brett Dobson in the box. I've never seen a goalie actually go to the box. The Bandits' offense, the Bandits' power play did not come through on the man advantage. Georgia was able to kill off the entire 5 minutes, but immediately after the time went out, when Shanahan was still on the floor, Tehoka Nanticoke was standing in front of the net. Shanahan misplayed a pass to a defender, and Nanticoke fired it right by his old teammate and then started clapping immediately in Devlin Shanahan's face, which was hilarious. And the Bandits took an 11-9 lead. Ian McKay would add 1 more. That was his second of the game at the end of the third quarter. Bandits up 12-9 heading to the fourth. Shane Jackson scored his 4th of the game to pull Georgia back within 2. That was less than a minute into the fourth. But then Dane Smith responded. Dane Smith scored a shorthanded goal, his 4th of the game, to put the Bandits ahead 13-10. Georgia would get 1 more. Buffalo would get 2 more, including an empty netter from Dylan Robinson. And the Bandits took the win 15-11. So Matt Vince had a decent game in net, 32 saves on 43 shots. Not spectacular necessarily. Brett Dobson, 39 saves on 52 shots. Devlin Shanahan, 6 saves on 7 shots. Nice, 6-7. Anyways, so the Bandits are off to a 1-0 start. They have this weekend off before returning home. Next weekend, Buffalo will host the Halifax Thunderbirds next Saturday night at 7 p.m. in their Home for the Holidays game. I will be there for that. And some other interesting things to look forward to on the season. January 3rd, the Bandits host the Las Vegas Desert Dogs in the return of both Chase Frazier and Chris Cloutier to Buffalo. Some other games. The Bandits play on Valentine's Day this year. They're on the road. They're at Halifax that night. NLL Finals rematch on February 27th as the Bandits host the Saskatchewan Rush. They play twice this season, once in Buffalo, once in Saskatchewan. February 27th in Buffalo. March 28th will be in Saskatchewan. And Buffalo takes their first ever trip to Oshawa, as, of course, the Albany Firewolves relocated in the offseason, headed to Oshawa. And the Bandits will actually finish out the regular season at Oshawa on April 18th. So 1 game down, 17 more to go for the Bandits. They're off to a solid start, 15-11 win over Georgia. We'll see how that can parlay into the rest of the season. Going to take a short break. When I come back, I'm going to talk about the Sabres again. Back in the loss column last night, and up and down the roller coaster of a season we go. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports this afternoon on WCVF 88.9, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports. The Sabres are back to their losing ways after back-to-back wins. They had a shootout win in Minnesota on Saturday night, beating the Wild 3-2. And an impressive win on Monday night as well, as the Sabres hosted the Winnipeg Jets. And the Sabres beat Winnipeg 5-1. It was so bad that the Jets held a players-only meeting with the doors closed after the game. Usually when teams host players-only meetings, it's not to go around and talk about what the guys did well during the game. It's usually one of your captains and leaders standing up and, saying that whatever garbage was just on the ice was unacceptable and we've got to play a lot better. Maybe the Sabres should do that every once in a while. Actually, no, the only players-only meetings that the Sabres have is when they agree to, protest against the fans for getting mad at them. So the Sabres are back to their losing ways, of course, to the surprise of absolutely no one. Buffalo has started their 6-game road trip with a 5-2 loss in Philadelphia. It was a game that actually started really well for the Sabres. Buffalo jumped out on an early power play. Jason Zucker scored for the Sabres just 4 minutes into the game. Assist from Josh Doan and Josh Norris, who Norris has actually been pretty impressive. He scored 2 goals in the win over the Jets on Monday. So Buffalo took an early 1-0 lead, and then the Sabres decided to decided it would be really fun to just take a lot of penalties. So Buffalo, of course, you had a regular penalty. And then Travis Konechny scores on the power play to tie the game. The Sabres challenged it, which the rule of if there's any sort of contact with the goaltender, it being no goal, I think it's a stupid rule. I think it's ridiculous. I think, if it's egregious, yeah, obviously it should be no goal. But, come on. We're challenging things for... And I don't blame Lindy Ruff for challenging it. That's the rule. He has no control over the rule. But, you're talking about... You're challenging, and saying, it should be no goal because a player stood in front of the goalie and their elbow grazed against the elbow of the goaltender for half a second, 5 seconds before the puck was even shot towards the net. And we're saying, well, that's no goal. Really? It's ridiculous, but it blows my mind. So the challenge obviously was unsuccessful, which in the NHL's great mind, if you lose a challenge, so of course in the NFL, you lose a challenge, you lose a timeout, right? In hockey, if you lose a challenge, it's a penalty, which still kind of, I don't know about that. I still think that's maybe a little bit ridiculous. So the challenge is unsuccessful. Sabres went back to the penalty kill, and Trevor Zegras scored to put the Flyers up 2-1. Almost immediately after that, at even strength, Bobby Brink scores to put the Flyers up 3-1. The Sabres gave up 3 goals in a 59-second span and trailed 3-1 at the end of the first period. And, I texted my mom last night as the 3-goal run shortly after it happened, and I told her that, we're watching a group of players that is made out of tissue paper. And the reason I say that is because this is a group, you allow 3 goals in 59 minutes. Clearly, you can't handle adversity. Clearly, you don't know what to do when you mess up. And the Sabres have been really bad on the road this season. They are 2-7-2 away from KeyBank Center this year. The thing that slays me, though, is that this division, the Atlantic Division, has really not been all that good this year. The Sabres are 11-12-4, 26 points. In theory, that would put them way out of anything. They would actually be in dead last if they were in the Metro. The Sabres are in 7th. They're 1 point ahead of Florida. The Sabres are only 8 points behind the Tampa Bay Lightning, who lead the division. We're 2 months into the season. It blows my mind. We're 2 months into the season, and the top to bottom in this division is separated by 9 points. The Metro's even closer. It's only separated by 7 points. It just shows that a playoff spot this year could be attainable for the Sabres. It really could be. But there are issues. Number one, they don't have a consistently reliable goaltender. They have a trio of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Alex Lyon, and Colton Ellis. Colton Ellis played last night. Luukkonen played in the win on Monday. And they kind of keep rotating between these three. Alex Lyon had a good start to the year. He's kind of cooled off since then. Luukkonen started really bad. He's been better as of late. Colton Ellis started okay. He's been, below average. It just, you're paying Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen almost $5 million a year for the next 3 years to be your starting goaltender. And I don't know that the Sabres are really seeing dividends on that. In addition to that, you've got, now that the Sabres have gotten healthier, which is great. Obviously, Rasmus Dahlin is back from his leave of absence where he was tending to his fiancée back home in Sweden. You had, obviously you've got Jason Zucker's back from injury. Josh Norris is back from injury. There's a few, Zach Benson's back from injury too. So it's great to see these guys coming back. The thing is, Buffalo needs to, the consistency has not been there with the Sabres at all. I've said it from the beginning of the year. If the Sabres don't make the playoffs this year, Kevin Adams absolutely has to be fired. Will he be? I don't think so. But, I would have fired him 2 years ago. Actually, no, to be completely honest, I never would have hired him because I would have looked for a candidate with, experience, probably, that would help. And experience in the sense of actually working in the front office of an NHL organization rather than teaching 10-year-olds how to play hockey next door. But, so the Sabres are 11-12-4 overall in the season. One thing that's got to change, this team has got to play better on the road. The Sabres have been awful on the road this year. They've played 11 games away from KeyBank Center this year. They've won 2 of them. That is not at all conducive. And you know what the funny thing is, too? Those 2 wins, you had an overtime win in Detroit in mid-November and the shootout win in Minnesota last Saturday. The Sabres have not won a game away from home in regulation yet this year, and we are 2 months into the season. If that is, and it better start now, because the Sabres have a 6-game road trip. They have 5 away games left of a 6-game road trip. 4 of those 5 up in Canada. You might want to figure out how to win a game in regulation because you're playing against a couple teams who are solid teams, and you might want to figure out how to get some wins so that we're not sitting here in March talking about, is Kevin Adams going to get fired? Is Lindy Ruff going to get fired? Who are the Sabres going to pick with the 7th overall pick in the draft when they inevitably end up with it? Anyways, the Sabres are in Winnipeg tomorrow against the Jets, which will be interesting the Sabres looked really, really good on Monday night, which again is another mind-boggling thing with this team, how they have game like November 17th, they looked really good when they play the Oilers. Then they lay an egg against the Calgary Flames. Then they have back-to-back games against Chicago and Carolina where they look great. And then back-to-back against Pittsburgh and New Jersey where they fall flat on their face. Then they win back-to-back and beat Minnesota and Winnipeg. Look dominant in the Winnipeg game. And then fall flat on their face against Philadelphia. It's just the inconsistency of this team has been such an issue. And it's something that absolutely has got to be fixed. But again, for the Sabres, there's a lot more season left to be played. For the Bills, it's a little bit different. And we will turn our attention to the Bills here in just a quick second. But, of course, the Bills are 8-4. So not as much time, not as much room for error for them. So I'm going to take a very, very, very short break and then finish out the show talking about the Bills and, of course, making my picks for next week's NFL action. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports on WCVF 88.9, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. And we're back on Big Blue Sports. I told you it was going to be a short break. I've only got 10 minutes left. So the Bills in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. We talk about this inconsistency too. So the Bills off the bye week. Historically under Sean McDermott, the Bills are fantastic off the bye week. They've actually never lost. The Bills won back-to-back games coming off the bye week. They went to Carolina and, just obliterated the Panthers in a 40-9 win. They had the game against Kansas City, which they won it 28-21. They played great in that game. Then they go down to Miami and lay a complete dud in a loss to the Dolphins. They come back home in a wild game, an entertaining game. Josh Allen goes nuclear and the Bills beat Tampa. Then they go down to Houston and lose a Thursday night game to the Texans where they look rough. They looked rough. So it's kind of like, all right, which Bills team is going to show up? And on Sunday, I will say the Bills defense showed up. The offense did not in the first half. So this was a game that was scoreless with 9 minutes to go in the first half. Buffalo had a promising opening drive that ended in an interception. And later in the second quarter, a James Cook fumble led to a Jaylen Warren touchdown for Pittsburgh to put the Steelers ahead 7-0. The offense was able to drive down the field and looked like they were going to go for it on a 4th and short, but Alec Anderson jumped early, a false start. The Bills would kick a field goal, and they were down 7-3 at the half. The Bills went into this game very banged up. They were missing both of their starting offensive tackles as both Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown were out. Buffalo started Ryan Vandemark at left tackle and Alec Anderson at right tackle. Apart from that and another false start penalty that Anderson had gotten early in the game, they were very good. They did a great job for Buffalo, did everything that the Bills coaching staff could have asked of them. So, you had those two. You also had Terrell Bernard was out injured as well defensively for Buffalo. So the Bills offense was, no, they were essentially dead in the water in the first half. Did nothing. And I was thinking at halftime of this game, I was just thinking somebody's gonna have to make a play. Somebody's gonna have to step up and make a huge play. And who else but free agent signing Joey Bosa would answer the call? The first play of the second half, Aaron Rodgers was crushed from behind by Joey Bosa, fumbled the ball, and Christian Benford, who's been maligned at times this year. I mean, Benford, a guy who's been an excellent corner for Buffalo the last few years. He had a rough first half of the season. He's been good the last few weeks, but Benford picks up the fumble and runs it back for a touchdown. The Bills take the lead 16 seconds into the half. And Benford wasn't done there either. So Aaron Rodgers, because he got lit up like a Christmas tree a few weeks ahead of the holidays, Aaron Rodgers was knocked out of the game temporarily, causing the backup quarterback Mason Rudolph to come in. And Rudolph had a pass that was intercepted by who else but Christian Benford again. Benford coming away with the interception. That led to the Bills lining up a 4th and goal from the one. They go for it, which every time they go for it on 4th and goal, I'm like, yes, yes. I don't like kicking chip shot field goals on 4th and short. I hate it. So 4th and goal at the 1. Josh Allen throws a 1-yard touchdown pass to Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman's back, everybody. He knows how to play football. That's impressive. We haven't seen that at all this year, except for week 1. So the Bills take the lead 16-7 because Matt Prater did miss the extra point. But Buffalo led by 9 going into the 4th quarter. Early in the 4th, it was Josh Allen time yet again. Allen runs for an 8-yard touchdown to put the Bills ahead 23-7, capping off a 15-play, 83-yard drive. The run marked Josh Allen's 76th career rushing touchdown, which is the most in NFL history. He passes Cam Newton for the most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback in NFL history. Cam had 75 in his career, which warmed my heart a little bit because obviously me being a Bills fan and an Auburn Tigers fan, seeing both Josh Allen and Cam Newton at the top of that list definitely warms my heart. Although I know that a certain loyal listener, cough, cough, Chloe Kowalik, is not the biggest Cam Newton fan, but that's okay. Cam was great in his own right. I like Auburn Cam better than Carolina Panthers Cam. But the Bills take a 23-7 lead. Matt Prater would kick a 37-yard field goal in the 4th quarter. The Bills dominate Pittsburgh. The Steelers got booed during Renegade, which is a crazy thing. So the Steelers, of course, they play Renegade by sticks in every game. It's kind of how like the Bills have done with Mr. Brightside. And I heard Steelers fans say that this is maybe the first time ever that they've heard Renegade get booed because the Bills' defense was, they stifled Pittsburgh's offense the entire game. So the Bills win 26-7. They go to 8-4 on the year. And coming up ahead, the Bills have a game that was kind of a question mark for a while of what it would look like. So the Bills hosting the Cincinnati Bengals at 1 o'clock on Sunday. And this was a game that we weren't sure if Joe Burrow was going to be back for this game or not. Burrow is back. He returned on Thanksgiving night in Baltimore against the Ravens, which was a dominant win for Cincinnati. And Cincinnati's defense looked phenomenal, which is weird because they've been one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So the Bills hosting the Bengals on Sunday. This is one that kind of makes me nervous now that Burrow is healthy. But the other thing to remember with this game is that Cincinnati's defense is one of the worst in the NFL. I think this is going to be a really high-scoring game. And my hope is that Buffalo comes out on top. Also wanted to, before I make my picks, I also wanted to discuss a little bit of news that came out. So Darius Slay, who was put on waivers by the Steelers. Of course, Slay is a former Pro Bowler. He had great years with the Lions and the Eagles. His nickname was Big Play Slay. Darius Slay was claimed on waivers by the Bills yesterday. He is not sure, though, if he is going to continue playing. So he is contemplating retiring. I think that was probably part of the reason Pittsburgh put him on waivers. The Bills claimed him, and his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, who represents a lot of other NFL players, Rosenhaus said, quote, Slay is honored that a first-class organization like the Bills claimed him, but he's going to take some time away from football right now and decide in the next few days if he wants to keep playing. So we'll see where that situation goes. I wouldn't take it as a huge thing if he decides to retire. If not, cool. It's more depth, but, if not, it's just something to keep an eye on. So I'm going to finish out the show this afternoon making my picks for this week. We've actually got a pretty good game tonight. The Dallas Cowboys heading to Detroit to take on the Lions. I've said it all year, and I'll say it again. The Cowboys are nothing away from Jerry World. The Lions get the win in this game. Sunday's 1 o'clock games, the Seahawks in Atlanta against the Falcons. The Seahawks are 9-3. Because football makes no sense, I'm going to pick the Falcons because the Falcons beat good teams and lose to bad teams. They've done it all year. Titans and Browns in Cleveland. Oh, boy, that's going to be a fun one. I'm going to go with the Titans just because I could not care less about that game. Washington in Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Washington at 3-9. They took Denver down to the wire on Sunday Night Football in Minnesota against the Vikings. Even without Jaden Daniels, I think Washington gets the win. Miami going to face the Jets. The Dolphins came away with a big win last week. Miami at 5-7. The Jets 3-9. The Jets, I believe, also won last week. Yes, beat the Falcons. I think the Jets get the win because I don't like to pick the Dolphins. New Orleans and Tampa easily. The Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. Both teams 8-4. This one's going to be interesting. The Colts are going to need to show that they're not of the fraudulent variety. I don't think they are, but I do think Jacksonville gets the win. Steelers and Ravens, some good old AFC North football in Baltimore. The Ravens are reeling from their loss to Cincinnati. I think they rebound with a win. We'll pick the Bills game last, of course. 4:05, the Broncos in Vegas to take on the Raiders. This is a game that I think will be weirdly close. I think Denver wins it, but I think it will be weirdly close. And also an interesting thing to note with the playoff picture, if Denver wins this game, then any two-way tiebreaker between the Broncos and Patriots would go Denver's way, which is interesting. 4:25, the Bears in Green Bay to take on the Packers. I'm going with Green Bay in that game, even though I think the Bears are a solid team. The Rams at the Arizona Cardinals. I think the Rams get the win. Sunday Night Football, this is going to be good. The Texans in Kansas City take on the Chiefs. I would love to pick the Texans. I think the Chiefs, with their backs against the wall, get the win at home. Monday Night Football, the Eagles in L.A. against the Chargers. I think that's going to be a really good game. I'm going to pick the Eagles. There you go, Chloe. I'm going to pick your Eagles. And of course, the final game, the Bills hosting the Bengals. Look, I think this one could totally go either way. Either way, I think it's going to be an incredibly high-scoring game. I don't like to pick against the Bills, so I'm probably going to let my homerism show a little bit. I'm going to pick the Bills to win this game 38-35. So that's going to do it for Big Blue Sports this afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Be sure to tune in next week, and be sure to tune into FRS this weekend for Radiothon. Big Blue will not be on, but there will be plenty of other shows that you can catch for 24 hours straight of live radio. So thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports this afternoon. Local at 1 is next. You're listening to WCVF 88.9, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. We'll catch you next week.